Thank you. You look real nice in your tie.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. This contract with Starling Madison Lofquist Incorporated SML is for the forensic investigation of the dome collapse at Barbara Antonsen Memorial Park. The initial portion of the contract, the site investigation, was conducted between September 19th and September 24th, and that was concluded yesterday. Analysis will begin after approval of this contract and is expected to be complete within the next few weeks. Staff will then work towards getting on the November 13th council agenda for presentation of that final report. And we did talk earlier about one of the main important reasons for this investigation is to get the details of why exactly the dome collapsed, so that staff can have that information ready for council for when council needs to make a decision regarding whether or not we move forward with the project. The contractor's insurance company is working on their own investigation, and they have let staff know that they will not release their information until after they've completed their subrogation process. So yeah, that's all I have.
Before we go on, I just want to go back to agenda item 9A. I did not go to the public. I did not have any cards requesting to speak. Would anybody like to speak to that particular agenda item? Not seeing any. We'll come back to agenda item 9B. I'll open it to the public for any comments from the public. I do not have any cards. Would anybody like to speak on this topic? Not seeing them. We'll bring it back to council for questions and comments. Questions and comments. Council? Councilor Luttrell?
Andy, does Tiffany know not to do anything until directed by council? Because at the last meeting, it seemed as though they were, raring to go as soon as they get their report and everything says, go forward and build this again and so on. But I'm assuming that they know that everything is on hold until...
They do know that the city will have to make the final decision regarding whether or not we actually do rebuild the structure. They have stated a few times that their insurance company has said that they want to proceed and rebuild, but they do understand, and we've told them that the city will have to be the ones to decide whether or not we do proceed with that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McElroy?
Andy, let me just explore this with you. Let's say that we find that it was the rebar that was insufficiently installed. Are we going to say to Tiffany or the others, we will not authorize rebuilding the dome until you strengthen the rebar? Is that what this is all about? Or the design was flawlessly made? Or the shotcrete was too heavy? Whatever the problem that we find through our independent forensic engineer, will we insist that that be corrected before the dome is rebuilt?
Absolutely.
Okay, second question. Are we obligated now to a $42,000 contract with Starling, Madison, and Lofquist with what Tim Ernster did, or are we only obligated to $25,000?
Right at this very second, we're obligated to $25,000, and the $42,000, just to clarify, that are not to exceed.
What if we don't approve approve anything above 25. Does that end the deal with the forensic engineer, or does he want 42?
Yeah, it would end where we're at now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ward?
In other words, they did their assessment, I'll just keep it secret, we don't get any report, they don't owe us anything if we do not authorize the additional $17,000.
I understand, I believe I understand what you're saying, and I think given our relationship with them, Counselor, they would at least tell us, you know, in broad terms what they think, but I don't think we would get a final report, and we certainly would not get the detailed investigation that we are relying on. So they would just tell us this is what we found in general terms, but we didn't go into deep analysis of it.
Well, I applaud the city manager's preemptive strike here in a situation of this magnitude and caught us so far off guard, and the timing and all that kind of stuff. I think he probably erred on the right side to engage this company with the $25,000. I'm a little upset that they're holding us up for another 17. Andy, with who's going to make a recommendation to the council that we go ahead and reconstruct the dome, or that because of whatever reason we don't do it? Is that going to come from you, or is that going to come from Charles, or from this city or this company that has been retained? Who's going to make the recommendation to us? Because certainly looking at the report's not going to tell me anything.
The staff, namely between myself, Tim Esper, and the city attorney, would be making a recommendation to council of what we think about moving forward with the project.
And you can't do that without that entire report. Is that your position?
I would not be prudent of me to do it, I don't think.
Okay.
Councilor Martinez? If you guys would say thank you just to help me out.
Thank you.
No, it just helps me.
Charles, Andy, with regards to Tiffany, weren't they instructed to at least clean up the site? They didn't need our approval to do that, or did they?
No, they did not need our approval to do that.
Now, with regard to clean up the site, what does that entail? Does that also mean breaking down the pad or the concrete foundation that's there already, or are they going to maintain that?
Yeah, they will be removing the foundations. The foundations were damaged during the collapse, so they'll have to do that part as well.
Now, the 17,000, no greater than, because of the 25 plus 17 for the 42. What are we going to get for that 17 that we aren't going to see in the 25?
The in-depth analysis of the data that they've gathered, what they've done at this point is just gather data, and for the remainder of the contract they'll be doing the analysis of that data. The report.
Does that detailed analysis include what we talked about earlier, a model?
Yes.
Computer model, I guess, to determine the stress points or whatever?
Yes, sir.
Now, if I recall in the Red Rock News, someone said that Tiffany agreed that if design enhancements were required, they would do it for free. Is that true?
I think that, Councilor Martinez, that what they had said was that if there are minor adjustments to the existing design, additional reinforced rebar in certain points, that they would be able to go ahead and do that. If there was a fundamental flaw in the design, then it would not cover a redesign, a different design. So if there were certain things to enhance the existing design, yes. If it was a change in design, no.
Okay, it was brought up earlier, basically the reason we're doing this, number one, is because we can't get the information from the insurance company that Tiffany had. And if we were to wait for that information, if we ever could, it'd be sometime in the future, 1 or 2 years or something like that. Is that correct, Mike?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. First of all, yes, Tiffany's insurance carrier has hired an expert to help them in the subrogation, in other words, in assessing fault for this. so that they can litigate those issues possibly. That information is all attorney-client privileged, and they have not indicated they would be forthcoming, at least in the short term, to disclose that. Certainly if their expert goes to trial, usually a report is disclosed, but we don't know if that's going to happen or when that's going to happen. So the lack of any disclosure in a timely fashion is certainly one reason. I think the other reason, though, is that there were a number of people doing an investigation, the subcontractors either on their own or elsewise, and there's always the potential that you might have conflicting reports or conclusions reached by different parties, and that would put the city in a very precarious position of having to pick which one they wanted to believe and which one they didn't want to believe. And so we felt, for all of those reasons, it was prudent to hire an expert that could give us very timely information, and we wouldn't be at the behest of waiting for these other experts to voluntarily disclose it, and we would have a greater comfort level in terms of the conclusions that are reached, that they are conclusions that we can rely heavily on. And so for all those reasons, the staff felt it was important to get the ball rolling, because the inspection period was set for the 20th through the 24th of September, and that had to happen. And so in order for that to happen, Tim approved the initial $25,000, and now we're asking for you to do the not to exceed amount of $42,000. But I want to emphasize that's a not to exceed amount, and chances are that it will hopefully come in under budget. For example, I know they had budgeted 4 days of inspection time, and I think they took at most half of that. Is that correct, Andy? 2 days?
Correct.
So I think you will see hopefully some cost savings, or that it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that you're going to be paying $42,000 for the whole thing. So hopefully that gives you a feeling for what the staff's concerns were in going forth with this, and why we're asking you to approve this additional funding.
The approval to go forward with Barbara Antonsen Memorial Park project was approved by the previous council. And people were asking me, and I was not on council at that time, but I thought it was a good project. Now, personally, I think spending not to exceed $42,000 is a valid expenditure to make me feel good that this thing is not going to collapse when it is built, because that would be one heck of a liability to the city. We need to know why it happened, and it's not going to happen again. And I think that's a small amount to pay to make us all feel better. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, thank you for saying thank you.
I'm in harmony with Councilor Martinez that this is a decision of some magnitude, and to have a direct report from people that we have selected and who we are interacting with directly, I think is prudent. And I can think of analogies, on a much smaller scale of how you go about making a decision on a car repair, or any purchase of some substance in your household, that you get your direct information, especially when it has the safety, the public safety factor that the pavilion of this nature does, and used by the public. As I recall, the contract between the city and this contractor, this provider, was negotiated for, this is what we want, and they indicated this is what we can do, and we'll do it, and it's going to cost you 42. And so it wasn't that they said, well, for 25 we can do X, and we can, for an additional 17 we'll do X plus. It was 42. But because of the city management's desire to get it started, they started it under the umbrella of the 25 authority, and they're coming to us to say, okay, let's do the whole contract. But it's not that the contractor himself is saying, you know, I'll give you this big of a report. If you want the whole thing, it's going to cost you another 17. That's how I understand it.
Well, one thing that we had to make sure of is that the observations and inspections were covered by the initial contract because it was occurring prior to today. So that's kind of the way, why we phrase it that way, is that those observations have already been covered by that initial contract. But it didn't necessarily take the full 25, you're correct about that.
I understand what you're saying. So, you know, I'm in favor of moving forward with it. I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable considering a decision to stop the project or to finish the project without that kind of expertise and concise report that gives you folks the position to be able to recommend based upon that kind of solid information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Williamson?
Yeah, I remember I was in the audience the night the previous council approved it, and I know there's a lot of opposition to the project, and there has been all along from the beginning. It's a project that's gone on for 9 years or something, and I was very happy that it was approved. I think those people, we have an obligation to let them know. We have the community what went wrong. It's not just a question of I feel I need this information before I can make a decision, before I'd feel comfortable making a decision. And I think the community is owed an explanation. When something goes wrong, it just costs money, and something went wrong, and we have to know. A computer simulation would seem to me something that we absolutely need to have. It's a state-of-an-art thing. The thing fell down. Luckily, nobody was killed. I think we have to pay this amount of money to find out what it is, whether it is a design error or a construction error or something that can be fixed. And I think it's irresponsible for us not to know what that is before we make a recommendation. I supported the project. I still support the project, but I would never approve continuing the project without information as to what went wrong. So I think this is, when things go wrong, it costs money, and that's just what's happened here, and I think we have to know, and I certainly would want to know.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's a training session tonight. Councilor McElroy?
I'd like to clarify one thing. At this juncture, Tiffany, the primary contractor, has gone to its insurance company. That insurance company has retained a forensic engineer who has done their investigation. They have kept that to themselves. And they have said to us, we want to move forward and reconstruct the pavilion dome, and we'll pay for it. Am I correct so far?
Well, one clarification I would make is, the way I understand it is that they're still working on their analysis as well. So they're not complete at this time, but they are working on it.
Haven't they told us they want to rebuild at this point?
Yes, they have told us that they do want to rebuild. What they have explained very carefully to us is that their insurance, so to speak, takes them back to the point, you know, where the dome collapsed. They don't want to do it when it looks like there's a risk that it may fail if certain corrections aren't made. You know, but their recommendation, they indicate, may be, you know, to move ahead. We don't know, you know, but to take it back to that point, I think we need confidence that going ahead, the structure can succeed, and that's what we'd like to know from our, you know, from our person, because then we would be saying to the council, yes, this project should move ahead, or no, it shouldn't move ahead. Because at some point, we still need to expend money, you know, to arrive at a complete structure, and we want to make sure that complete structure is correct.
Charles, I can appreciate that, and I understand it. But if we don't do anything, in other words, we don't go more than the $25,000 we're legally obligated to pay, if we don't do anything, then Tiffany and all the other contractors and insurers have got to go forward with what their decision is and bear the consequences. Am I correct in that?
Let Mike correct me, but my understanding is they go to the point where it failed, and then it comes back to us.
So, Councilor McElroy, what the insurance company has agreed to do, because they do have this builder's risk policy, is to pay. And that means that, yes, the insurance is going to pay for what occurred, meaning it's going to bring it back to, as Charles mentioned, the point of construction, the 46% completion that they were at. So it will bring them back to that level. What the city has said is, no, none of that happens until we have confidence that it will succeed, it will be a successful project, that it will not fail again, that we understand why it came down in the first place. And even if they believe that there are minor modifications that they could make to make it a viable project and make it stand, until we have seen the forensic analysis and have the same level of confidence that that is all that's required for this to be a successful project and to stay standing and be safe for the community, then we are not comfortable with them moving forward with reconstruction.
I think I'm beginning to understand. They will only take us to the point of collapse. They will not build the pavilion again at their expense.
No, they will not.
Yes. I think that changes everything in my mind, because I was thinking they were going to go forward with the contract with us and them to build it for $1 million whatever, the way they decide to build it, whatever they discover in the investigation, but only to the point of collapse.
That's correct.
That changes everything. Thank you.
Thank you for saying thank you. Councilman Luttrell.
Thank you. Charles and Andy, in Exhibit A, page A1, you have the contract for professional services. Has this contract already been signed with the forensic engineer, Starling Madison Lofquist? It says contract for professional services for the city of Sedona.
Yes, it has.
Okay, because in that contract, under B, it says that not to exceed a total amount of $25,000. The remaining balance is subject to the approval of the Sedona City Council, which approval will be sought at the regular council meeting on September 25. Upon approval, the not to exceed amount of the agreement shall be $42,675. So they gave that number to you right up front. And I think it was just the city manager making a judgment call that he could authorize 25, and probably council would be interested in doing this, and therefore we would probably approve it. I think he made the right judgment call. I think it's essential for the city to know what happened and to have a third-party independent person telling us what's going on so that we can make an informed decision. So I don't think there's anything unusual here. It's just, I think the timing of it and the requirement of it getting done quickly, is that correct, was really what pushed all of this ahead of time?
Correct.
Yes? Okay. I'm comfortable with it. I think it's great.
Councilor Ward.
It probably won't surprise anybody here that I'm a process kind of guy. When did we know, when did you know that it was going to cost $42,000 and not $25,000?
Let's see, that would be, I mean, the minute that SML gave me their proposal, that was their number, and
And when was that?
it was, let's see, August 31st.
Okay, we have met with the city council or a city manager since then. I think, well, the only thing I'm having problem now is why didn't we know this up front? I think if the city manager said I authorized 25, or it's going to cost more than that, well, we've got to negotiate the details, and it's coming back. Way back in the beginning of September, when this first thing came up, I probably wouldn't have my hesitations that I've been talking about during this period and during our workshop. So, just for my edification in the future, don't keep us in the dark. You know, be upfront with some of these things as you become aware of them, so that we don't, at least I don't get caught off guard. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand Councilor Ward's concerns. That was created a little bit of rub with the council that all of a sudden we were really, we were pretty much committed to a $43,000 contract without really looking at it and understanding why. Now, on the other hand, the city attorney sent out a memo explaining the purposes of hiring a forensic engineer. I don't remember when that was, Mike, but you know, it was some time ago, and so the discussion took place, or at least the information was there for us to see. I think that the simple fact of the matter is that maybe the city manager or the staff should have disclosed what the commitment was, but we weren't having a city council meeting, so how could we vote on it? So this was really a call by the city manager, and it was based on time is of the essence.
And I appreciate that.
And very seldom does that happen, and so, you know, I certainly see the wisdom behind doing that. I do want to take issue with the Red Rock News in terms of the headline that they put out there with this article last Thursday. You know, basically, I thought the headline was misleading, and it kind of led the reader to think that, you know, there was only one option, and that was to rebuild. And actually, the option is, I think, three major options. One is to rebuild, one is to redesign and build something else, and the third is do nothing. The question is, if we do nothing, do we get paid by the insurance companies and walk away from this thing?
Question is, if we do nothing, do we get paid by the insurance company?
Yeah, we've invested, you know, $250,000 or more at this point. There's been a collapse. You know, do we get paid back for that expenditure, or what if the council just decides, you know what, we're not interested in pursuing this anymore? This is just a what if.
Yeah, I think it's premature to really talk about that, and maybe that's a better subject for an executive session.
Okay. So, you know, I understand the wisdom. You know, the thing that bothers me, well, I guess I understand the legalities. You know, each individual subcontractor is having their own forensic engineering done, and, you know, they're going to be advised by their attorneys in terms of what they should do, and they're not going to share that with the city. And certainly, we as a city council need to have our information, you know, that isn't biased. That, you know, we simply want to know what happened, and, you know, that will help us make our decision in terms of moving forward, whether we want to rebuild or not, whether we feel comfortable with this. And as Councilor Williamson said, you know, this is just the prudent thing to do. We need to have that education, and we need to have that information passed along to the public so they understand why we make whatever decision we make. So I'm in support of that. Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make one clarification, and I do believe that the city manager in his update on the last council meeting did inform the council that he had approved this contract and that we would be coming back to the council for the higher approval.
Yeah.
So I don't want to leave you with the impression that we were somehow hiding the ball. We did let you know the action we took weeks ago on this.
Yeah, just put council, I mean, obviously we can't just not approve the additional money so we don't get the information that we need. You know, and so, I don't know how we could have done it better, but, you know, that we are where we are, and I think that maybe, you know, it's pretty clear where the council's going to go with it, so, Councilor Ward?
Mike, is there an existing contract that has already been authorized by the city manager for $25,000?
I think we did sign.
Okay, why isn't this an addendum or a substitution for that contract?
Well,
I
it
think
is
this
the
is-
contract you have. We signed this contract. It's just that you got a blank one in your packet, but this contract hasn't been signed.
And I think what the contract says is that they are authorized up to $25,000, that they are not authorized for the additional 17 until you approve it. Now, in their detail of how they break out that 42,000, there are certain pieces. So, for instance, the structural analysis of the failure is 4,680 after they've collected the information. The finite element piece, which is what we talked about, the computer modeling, is an additional roughly 12,000. So, you know, maybe there are pieces of that that don't get completed to that level of detail if the entire contract is not approved. That doesn't mean that the entire 25 has already been spent and we just don't get a report. We just may not get the level of detailed analysis that we've been discussing here, and maybe it's scaled back to some more generalized conclusions and recommendations from the forensic engineer.
So we're authorizing this after the fact?
We have authorized up to 25. Right now, according to their estimates, because they were only here earlier this week or the end of last week to do the on-site piece, which was about 13,000, a little over 13,000. And as Mike mentioned, they had estimated those costs for 4 full days of 2 engineers. They were only on site for 2. So we can, I guess, assume that only half of those charges would be applicable, and we could argue that.
I understand all that. I'm just curious as to why it's not an amendment, or it's a reauthorization, or it's a substitution of a contract.
Councilor Ward, if you read the proposed motion, the motion is to approve the award of a professional services contract for forensic engineering, etc., and thereby increase the not-to-exceed amount of the contract from $25,000 to $42,675. So we have an executed contract, but as we've noted before in paragraph B, it says the remaining balance is subject to the approval of the City Council, which approval will be sought at a regular council meeting on September 25th. This is what we've done in light of the fact that we had to get these people working before this meeting, and this is how we've structured it. Now, hopefully you understand.
I didn't mean to put anybody on the defensive. I was just curious as to why it was just being done the way it is. Thank you.
Councilor Ward, would you like to make a motion?
Okay. I move to approve award of professional services contract for forensic engineering analysis for the Barbara Antonsen Memorial Park project to Sterling Madison Lofquist and Company Incorporated, and thereby increase the not-to-exceed amount of the contract from $25,000 to $42,675.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made by Councilor Ward, seconded by Councilor Luttrell. Any discussion? Councilor McElroy.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm a lot more comfortable after hearing the discussion tonight from Karen and from the engineers. Now that I know that we're going to the point with the insurance company, to the point of destruction and starting again. So when we move forward, we'll know exactly what happened. And we have skin in the game now that we didn't really have before. So I'm comfortable with approving this 42,675 motion.
You're going to have that opportunity right now.
I am.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes unanimously.